Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution. I shared with you a phrase a moment ago, which is the title of my talk, Living in the Hour of God. It's a phrase I first learned of from the Benedictine monk, Bede Griffith, living in the hour of God. And I'd like us for this month to take a deep dive into sacred activism, into the intersection between our spiritual understanding and practice and the actual world that we find ourselves living in. And I think if we look to the founders of the world's religions, we find that that is exactly what they did, that they've had a unique understanding and experience of God, and they attempted to describe that unique understanding and experience of God in an effort to help others, and then in an effort to deal with whatever were the issues that existed around them in the places that they lived and with the people that they worked with. And out of that relationship with spirit, out of that their own sense of connection with the divine by whatever name they called that, and their deep willingness to live from that understanding, they attempted and were driven by a vision of helping those around them. And I think it is actually perfect timing to launch this series on the 4th of July because we're living in a dream. We're living in the result of an aspirational dream of our founding fathers who believed that their lives could and in fact needed to be different. And so I want to talk about the intersection of both of those things this morning. And I want to begin by reminding us of the Declaration of Independence. I don't know if any of you have a practice of reading it on the 4th of July or from time to time, but I want to read some of it to you this morning because it is really the context for the message today. So in Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under
absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And then the declaration goes on to name numerous infractions, to lay out the facts, to explain the reason for this bold and audacious action that is being taken in this declaration. And then it goes on to say what those consequences will be and the actions that the colonies will take. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the nature and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That last line always stands out to me. We mutually pledge our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. There is a very inspiring piece written, I believe it was by the late commentator Paul Harvey, that outlines what happened to the signers of the Declaration of Independence, what it actually meant in physical terms and loss for them when they put their name on this document and gave their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. The Declaration was boldly and clearly aspirational, wasn't it? As we read these words, we're still doing our best to live into them. They're not manifest equally for all peoples in our country. If you think about it, it was an audacious experiment, and we're living in the results of that audacity, that wonderful courage. And as I was rereading this to myself over the weekend, I found myself saying that if I were to put it in just a few words, what they were saying is, enough is enough. Enough is enough. Enough of the way that they were being governed from across the sea. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. And I found myself, as I was thinking of that and reading these words, feeling as if we are also at a somewhat similar time in history as a country now and as a world. There are many of us that are saying in the very depths of our being, enough is enough. There has got to be a better way. That's what got us here in this amazing country. Our founding fathers, for all their strength and all their weaknesses and their human imperfections, just like us, said enough is enough and there's got to be a better way, a different way, and we're going to put our might behind that. And we're still doing our best, I believe, to try to move into that. The work is not complete. As Bede Griffith said, we are living in the hour of God. meaning we are living at this pivotal time that is calling upon each of us to rise up in ways that are right for us. We can't all do the same thing. We don't need to all do the same thing. But there are actions that you and I need to take. The more I listen to this younger generation, the more I listen to and read the news broadly, the more I am hearing of this unrest that people are feeling, this wonderful unrest, that I've got to do something. I've got to make a difference. And I believe that many of you in this room feel that way as well. And whether it is to get out there and to help at a shelter, or whether it is to be more mindful of how you spend your dollars, or whether it is to step into a particular social issue in the world and say, I can do this from my spiritual understanding, and this is the area I'm going to play in. There are more and more of us that are doing that, and there are more and more of us that are needed. When Bede Griffith spoke the words, the idea of living in the hour of God, this is what he was describing. He said, humanity has come to the moment when it will have to choose between trying to play God with the catastrophic results we see all around us and trying to become what all the true mystical traditions know we can become, one with God through grace in life. This is a dangerous and yet wonderful and hopeful moment, because if enough of us can choose the latter, the birth of a wholly new kind of human being, and so of a new world, is possible. What I have come to believe is that the very depth and extent of our crisis is calling forth an unprecedented force of transformation and healing, that if we can align ourselves with it, can not only help humanity survive, but also transfigure it. I'm reminded of the work of the futurist, the late futurist Barbara Marx Hubbard, who often talked about this idea of birthing a new humanity, that we are evolving in our consciousness what it means to be a human being. If we look at the founders of the world's religions, they spoke to the same kernel of idea, that we are growing and evolving, that there is something in us that allows us to be more than what we currently are, to take and build upon what we have done in the past, to learn from it, but to take and build upon it to create something better. And to create that something better, not just for our own individual lives, but for our lives as a collective humanity. In New Thought, we often say there is no private good, meaning that when I care for and do something good for myself, it cares for and it does good for others. That I need to forever be looking at, how do I widen my circle of interest? How do I widen my circle of concern? What is mine to do? If I leave you with no other question this morning, perhaps it is that question to ask of yourself, what is yours to do? And if you're already doing it, can you do it a little bit more? Can you enroll somebody else? Can you invite somebody else? Can you have a conversation with someone else to say, hey, we need to do this together? Wasn't it Margaret Mead who said, never doubt the power of a small group of people to change the world? Small, committed group of people to change the world. Indeed, in fact, it is the only thing that has ever done so, that as we join together, the church itself, and I use that with a capital C, is a result of people joining together around faith, around ideas that transform their lives individually. But if we look back to Jesus, he wasn't just about transforming an individual life. He was about making the world better for those around him. The Benedictine monk Bede Griffiths believed that there were three possible outcomes to the time that we are living in. And these were the outcomes he believed were possible. Sudden transformation, But he really didn't believe that was possible because he didn't believe that people could change that quickly, that it wasn't going to happen suddenly, or mass annihilation. And he didn't really like that idea either. He believed that there was a force for good. These are my versions of words to convey his idea, but that there was a force for good, that there was a benevolent spirit alive in the universe. Or, what he did believe in, was a great healing, which would lead to a new birth. When I look at where we are right now, I do think we are in the midst of a healing. It's messy, just like birth is messy, right? If you've ever seen a live birth, it's very messy and it's also very dangerous. But we are in a time of great healing. And we have to keep that front and center in our minds as we midwife what is possible for ourselves and for our world. A time of great healing. A time in which we are looking at ourselves collectively with eyes that I don't think we've used before. In fact, I found myself as I was thinking about where we are in history as a people, not just as a country. It's almost as if several key nations in the world are taking the fourth step of AA, are taking a moral inventory. As I've been listening to news coming out of Canada, of the children, the graves of children, of orphans that have been unmarked graves, children that were taken from indigenous families to try to convert them to Christianity, and lives and children that were lost. And how Canada is responding to that. And while they, I believe, just recently celebrated their independence, are also saying, while we celebrate our independence, we must also look and see where we have been and make amends for what we have done. I look at the history of Germany, and perhaps you have too. And the fourth step, if you will, that I think that they took as a country to look at the horror of Nazi Germany and to not forget that, to be able to heal from anything. We can't deny it. We have to look at it, and it's messy to look at. It's unpleasant to look at. South Africa and their Truth and Reconciliation. Their Truth and Reconciliation is like a moral inventory for a country, right? And things have improved. As we as a country, more and more people in our country are saying we need to look at our own history. Not to discount the good and the strength and the power and the uniqueness of the country or the aspirations on which it was founded, but to also not ignore, to actually learn for some of us our own history so that we can transcend it, that we can heal it, that we can make amends, whatever that's going to look like. It is a time of great healing, I believe. And to me, great healing, for as messy as it may be, is a time to feel optimistic, but it's not a time to sit back. It's a time to stay engaged. In a book I guess I put it here, in a book I have been rereading, Andrew Harvey's book, The Hope, A Guide to Sacred Activism. I like that. He's saying that the hope is linked to sacred activism. In this book, he writes a bit about the idea that we are living in a time of a mystical second coming. You know, in Christianity, traditional Christians look to Jesus to come back, to save the world, to save the souls that have believed in him as Lord and Savior, and that is the second coming. And those in that faith who believe that, I do not, but those in that faith who believe that are waiting for that moment. A new birth, they believe, will happen. But I believe a new birth is an entirely different new birth. It is a new birth that is happening inside of us in our consciousness as we are waking up to the reality of what it is to be a human family. And perhaps once and for all, to stumble our ways through with courage and deliberateness to get to the place where we actually do live out of those aspirational truths. 245 years ago, our founding fathers stepped into a bold an audacious experiment. And the stakes were very, very, very high, and the loss was very great. And the freedom that was won is not for any of us to ever take for granted. But I think that where we are now is every bit as important, because it's not just one people in one country trying to declare its independence and freedom, but I think it is the soul of humanity saying it is time for us to stand up for each other. When I look at any of the core of the world's teachings, at the core is always the idea of love and kindness to each other. And those can't just be words that we say or things we talk about in a place like this or any other faith community. We individually need to look at what does that mean in the way that we live our lives. In the book, Bede Griffith and Andrew Harvey talk about serving, the coming of this second Christ, very Christian kind of terms, but they talk about it in terms of serving the growing Christ or the growing divine nature in these three ways. And I want to leave these ideas with you as homework to ponder, that we are called to serve the growing Christ, or we are called to serve the growing divine consciousness in ourselves through prayer and meditation. In ourselves through prayer and meditation, to keep ourselves as whole and pure and of high consciousness as we possibly can, to serve the growing Christ, to serve the growing divine consciousness in ourselves through prayer and meditation. In others, we are called to serve it in others through seeing and calling forth the growing God nature in them. And that is not always easy to do. In the meditation practice that I do, it begins with holding a certain set of prayers and thoughts for myself, and then in radiating circles outward, beginning from me with those that I find easy to love, then with those that maybe I'm only acquainted with, and then to those that I am estranged with, and then to those that are really, really, really hard for me to hold in that space. But it is a way of moving into a consciousness of serving the growing divine consciousness in the other. And then they say to serve the growing Christ consciousness in history through sacred action. And so I hope you'll look at what is yours to do. What is yours to do? What feels right to you? If you're doing it, please keep doing it. If you're not, please find a way to say yes to some part of it. Namaste.